Um, I think I've always been involved in ventures, so I didn't really consider myself an entrepreneur as much as I was just naturally drawn to, starting up new things. And my very first business was a horse riding establishment. That's where I raised my first money. I think about $75,000 to start that up. I did that while I was doing my PhD. And as I was doing my PhD, I realized I really like the technology, but what I like most about technology is trying to productize it and get it in front of customers. And so as I evolved in my career, I always came back to developing products and getting them in front of customers, which evolved into new ventures. So all of my successful startups have come off of not-for-profit platforms. And what I've always been trying to do is develop a model that would allow not-for-profits to consistently spin off companies and new ventures. And over time, even as I was doing my last venture, which was Nextstream, I was working with Duke to teach here and also to find ways to develop that kind of model here. And that over time just evolved into a professorship. And I'm a professor of the practice, so my practice is actually still on the venture side to start up companies. And then I teach at the same time, so it's a very good, I think, model both for Duke and for myself. Kronos was a technology platform and a not-for-profit called MCNC. And the technology itself was micro-electromechanical systems technology. MCNC had one of the world's top micro-electromechanical systems teams, and they also had a capability to produce these devices. So just real quick, micro-electromechanical systems are microscale mechanical devices that are made using semiconductor technology. So MCNC had all the semiconductor technology capability and a very strong team and an incredible founder, Karen Marcus, who had developed this capability and had also raised a lot of grant funding for this capability. And then when I came along, I started doing the commercial side of it, selling devices and services to the commercial sector. And we eventually spun that out. And really the big story behind Kronos is when we spun it out, it was valued at $25 million. And we sold it 6 months later for $750 million. And so that's even, in the venture world, that would be considered a pretty big success. Stay really, really close to your customers. Kronos would not have been as successful as it was if we had not listened to our customers very carefully. Kronos became very successful in the photonics business. When we first spun it out, we considered ourselves a MEMS company. And our customers, and particularly Lucent and Nortel at the time, made it very clear to us that they thought that the opportunity really lay in photonics. And even though we weren't photonics experts, we were willing to listen to them and learn from them. And we became photonics experts very quickly. And that really changed our company, changed the value of our company, and allowed us to be as successful as we were. Well, I would say that a fatal mistake would have been if we had waited any longer to sell the company. So we were in a very unique market at the time, that we were part of the telecom bubble. And we were very, very fortunate to get an offer for a company at the very peak of that bubble. And there were other companies out there that also got offers at the same time and chose not to move quickly to accept those offers and sell their companies. We chose to sell. We thought it was a very, very good offer, and we chose to sell right away, even though some financial people advised us not to. They thought we could do even better. If we had waited even a month, I'm not sure we would have been able to sell Kronos the way we did, because the market dropped. We sold the company April of 2000, and if you look at the NASDAQ, it dropped like a rock right after we sold the company. So if you were in the market at that time, because of the dropping NASDAQ, it was very likely that you might not succeed. And there were many cases where companies had offers on the table. Those offers were rescinded because of the market conditions changed so drastically. Okay, well, you really have to put yourself into the position of the venture capitalist to understand what their requirements and needs are. And they're looking for very high rates of return. And in order to get those rates of return, they typically have to invest and get out within a reasonable period of time. So ideally 3 to 5 years. And they need to see exceptional growth in those 3 to 5 years to realize the returns that they need. So if you want to pitch to venture capitalists, you have to have a deal that fits that mold, right? You might have a very successful company, but if it's a modest growth company, it's not going to fit what the venture capitalist wants. You might have a very successful company, but you can't get, to the level of revenue that they need in order to exit their company. So you really need to make sure that your venture fits their needs, and make sure you study what their needs are in order to be able to pitch them effectively. I don't know if we've done anything crazy. I would say that we have always been very focused in approaching the venture capital community, and so we would spend a fair bit of time researching what type of investors would be interested in our deal, trying to find ways to approach those investors, and certainly developing our marketing communications approach to really target those investors. So for example, with our company NextStream, before we went out to raise our second round of funding, we worked really, really hard to get an article into the Wall Street Journal. And we were successful in doing that, and that made a big difference in terms of attracting venture capitalists to talk to us. So I wouldn't consider that crazy, but I would consider that probably one of our more successful campaigns, where we specifically targeted the Wall Street Journal to get an article in, and we were successful, and it definitely had an impact on our ability to reach the venture community. Sure. I've been involved in lots of ventures that didn't work. One of the things that I try to do, and I think most venture capitalists do and most investors do, is manage my risks so that there's not a great loss of money when there's failure. So this means, try to fail early. Also make sure that, you're not investing into a deep hole. There are times you're just going to have to stop and walk away when it gets too expensive. So while I've had, I think, there's 4 companies that we formed that have had some levels of success. There's many, many more that I've tried, maybe even started an actual company that have fallen by the wayside. And, modest losses along the way, but fortunately no drastic losses along the way. I think the fundamental difference between the corporate world and the entrepreneurial world is that within the corporate world, the need for personal success is not as high. You can participate within a group, have a very successful career, contribute to your company very successfully without achieving, an overwhelming personal success. I think as an entrepreneur, it's more black and white. You're either successful or you're not successful, and a lot of it rests on your own shoulders and the shoulders of your team that you have around you. And so it's a much more, I like to say it's a full contact sport. You're out, you're trying to score goals, and if you don't, you lose. Whereas within a large company, you don't quite have that impact. The type of people who are successful entrepreneurs are quite often people who don't do quite as well in the corporate world. They're not comfortable without trying to achieve some, significant personal success. I think at the very top of the list of characteristics of the entrepreneur is perseverance. The willingness to fail like a lot before you're successful. And in some cases, it's just a personality trait where it's not so much even a willingness, but that's just the way you're hardwired. The other things I think make entrepreneurs successful are their sales skills, their ability to sell something, whether it's an idea or an actual product. Again, within a corporation, that skill set is not as critical to your success. I mean, you can be very successful in a corporation without being able to sell. I don't think you can be very successful as an entrepreneur without the ability to sell or having someone close to you who's really good at selling. I would say at the top of that list would be if you're brand new to it, ideally work with a team that's already either had some success or previously, or maybe they're already working on a venture that is starting to work where they've raised some money, so that you can get a good feel for what this is truly like, and you can also learn what it takes to be successful as an entrepreneur. And obviously the younger you are, the better it is that you can get that learning under your belt before you go out on your own. I know there are certainly successful entrepreneurs out there that just start and they're so talented that off they go and they can be successful on their own, but that's not the case for maybe most people. Most people, even myself included, learning from others is what helps you become a really good entrepreneur in the future. So I would definitely say trying to be part of a smaller cog in a bigger team that is already on their way would be very, very helpful if you want to be an entrepreneur.